Pressing is all about risk versus reward, and I think Spurs took too much risk and paid the price for it yesterday against Chelsea. Welcome back to the Bowman YouTube channel. I hope you guys are doing well. Another video, another defeat, unfortunately, that we are talking about on the channel, but please make sure to subscribe. We're going to break down the Tottenham versus Chelsea game, what went wrong for Spurs, why I think Ange was mainly at fault for the defeat yesterday, and what he needed to do better in order to stop Chelsea being able to play through us is something that we're going to talk about. Because, like I said, that pressing, Spurs is very aggressive 4-1-4-1 pressing setup with Solanke, Son, Sarr, Kulusevski and Johnson going man for man on Chelsea's defence. Was very risk versus reward yesterday, and it did almost work for Spurs in some instances. We did create turnovers, but also we left ourselves very exposed, and it's exactly how Chelsea got themselves back into the game. Now, I think there were things that went obviously against Spurs. The momentum from Romero coming off and Dragusin coming on obviously was unfortunate in this moment, but it was also about Chelsea's setup and their ability to play through Tottenham. Obviously, Spurs went very aggressive, and you can see why they went very aggressive. Obviously, when you look at the team selection, Badiashile as a right foot or a left-footed centre-half playing on the right-hand side, he was obviously a trigger. Robert Sanchez was a trigger, given how poor they can be with their feet, especially Badiashile, kind of playing on the wrong side of the defence. Spurs have seen that before, and we've definitely used centre-halves that are playing on their wrong side as the trigger before. I remember Calvin Bassey against Fulham last season giving the ball away and giving us 2 goals, and Badiashile was clearly a target yesterday. He was obviously picking up the ball in a lot of right-back positions because Caicedo was inverting into midfield a lot of the time, and I think this is something that Spurs couldn't really deal with that well. Chelsea was stretching and almost building up with Sanchez as kind of that right centre-back a lot of the time. And although Spurs did create some turnovers, I think it worked more often than not in Chelsea's favour, and that's exactly where Sancho's goal came from. And Enzo Fernandez plays a big part in this. Spurs 2-0 up at this point. Brilliant first opening 10-15 minutes. Real intensity, which is something that we wanted to see. Obviously, after the back of a very drab, very dull performance against Bournemouth, that we didn't really show any intensity or energy in that game. And look, this Spurs squad is running on empty. We spoke about this after the Fulham game, 100%. But it was so great to see Spurs come and fly out the traps like that. And I didn't think Spurs' pressing was bad. I just thought that it was a little bit too risky, especially at 2-0 up. And this is where I put this on Ange, and we'll come and talk about that shortly. So you can see Robert Sanchez here plays that ball directly into Enzo Fernandez. There were so many times where Chelsea were able to find a spare man when they were building out. Obviously, there's lots of rotation in there with Caicedo coming in and inverting inside, but they work the ball from the centre out to the right in Badiashile. Palmer is offering an option on the right-hand side with Neto pushed up. And one thing that we saw all of the time was because Spurs was so worried about Cole Palmer, Basuma would almost attach himself to him, which meant that Chelsea had a spare man a lot of the time with Caicedo inverting into midfield. And often it was either Enzo Fernandez or Marc Cucurella that were able to kind of make the most of that in these kind of channels, in Chelsea building up. And that's exactly where the goal came from. And like I said, it was very risky from Spurs' point of view. And they worked the ball from the right back into the middle, and you can see Cucurella is the spare man there. Enzo Fernandez does really well here. And look, it's a good goal from a Chelsea perspective. Of course, it's not nice for Spurs to concede at this point in the game. Chelsea do a lot of good stuff here, and they've got a lot of technical quality, and that is something, despite the fact, if we roll it back, they are under pressure, and we put them under a lot of pressure building out, and they gave the ball back to us. There was a lot of technical quality in that back line, so you're going to expect them to be able to play through us. And I think that was evident at points, especially with someone like Romeo Lavia, who I thought was absolutely excellent in that first half, and we'll come back to the goal in a sec. You see here, this is the instance where arguably Dejan Kulusevski is lucky to find himself still on the pitch. I'm not 100% sure it was a red card. I thought the Caicedo one was, but again, that's probably an element of Spurs bias creeping into that. But you can see here, Chelsea are always going to be able to find avenues to play out when you've got the technical quality of someone like Romeo Lavia, who Dejan Kulusevski is right up of his backside there and is able to turn away from him. And then Chelsea are facing forwards, and they're in a position where they can attack. And obviously, he goes down with the head injury. But Chelsea's ability to kind of find that spare man really exposed the hyper-aggressive press of Tottenham here. And like I said, that spare man in this case is Marc Cucurella. And they're able, through that, because Basuma is attracted over to this right-hand side, worrying about Cole Palmer, where Spurs press quite narrow, where Johnson will try and track that run of Enzo Fernandez, it often leaves Cucurella and Sancho isolated. And they're in a 5v5 kind of situation here. And look, Spurs aren't in a bad position necessarily set up to defend this, but Enzo Fernandez's run takes Dragusin away, allows Jadon Sancho, who is playing with a lot of confidence at the moment, to drive inside and get a shot away at goal. Obviously, Dragusin is kind of dragged out by Fernandez's run, which is super smart. I thought Fernandez off the ball in the first half was great for Chelsea, and then the way that they changed things up in the second half meant that he gave them a lot more control on the ball as well. And Sancho, obviously, it's a great strike. And I speak about that control that Chelsea had on the ball in the second half. You look at that momentum bar there. Spurs were not in the game at all, and I don't think Spurs were necessarily in the game from the Sancho goal onwards, right? It was a really frustrating afternoon. And like I said, I do think in these kind of situations, when you are 2-0 up, I don't think you need to be that aggressive. And look, I've defended Ange a lot, and I really like Ange, and I'm glad that there's been news that's come out this afternoon that Spurs are prepared to stick by him, prepared to do everything they can to support him through this tough period, which, we'll believe that when we see it in terms of the board, in terms of what they do in January, because it's clear this squad still needs work. But I think one thing Ange has got to work on is that recognition of game state. And look, you can understand, obviously, why he wanted to do this, right? Why he wanted to be so aggressive with the press, because this was at 2-0. This Spurs had just scored the second goal. And we get a chance from that super aggressive press, and Chelsea are really under it. Badiashile into Caicedo, Sarr's on him straight away, and Spurs turn it over, and we fly forward. Sarr makes that run inside, Son makes that little run, cut back for a doggy who has that shot just wide. I think it probably was offside, but Spurs show that once they put their foot on the throat, they can really take games away from teams. But you could ask yourself the question, is it sustainable to play like this, where you're going to have to kill teams off 2-3, 4-0 in 10-15 minute spells, like we have done? Obviously, we've done that to teams. We have done it. Villa, we did it, of course, when we turned that game around. And if Spurs got a third goal here, it might have been a little bit of a different story, and we might have sat off that little bit more. But I think you need to sit off and not allow Chelsea, or not be this high risk, because you're allowing Chelsea to find that spare man all the time when they're playing out. And I think that's on Ange, in my opinion, especially with the fatigue and the tired nature of the squad as well. But there were other chances that came through Spurs' pressing as well. This was at 2-1, big chance for Dom Solanke, who I want to talk about actually, because on a day where there weren't many great Spurs performances, or I didn't think it was a great performance overall, despite an electric first 15 minutes, I thought Dom Solanke was absolutely excellent, particularly in that first half, and I'll speak about that a little bit more shortly. Again here, chance comes. Sanchez again, a little bit, I think a lot of Chelsea fans have criticised Robert Sanchez with his feet. He gives the ball straight to Pat Matasar, and you can see here, if I just drag this back and then maybe move it in shot... Oh, never mind. From the next slide, you can sort of see that Spurs, again, are in that 4-1-4-1 aggressive, high up the pitch shape in terms of the press. It works. They turn the ball over. It's a great ball from Sarr into Son. Solanke makes that run. It's maybe just a little bit behind him here, but take your chances. Look, that is a gilt-edged chance for Dom, who I thought was absolutely fantastic. And not just necessarily in his goal, which I loved. I absolutely loved his goal, because I think stuff like this is what we want to see a lot more from Dom Solanke. I've spoken about the fact that I think he's absolutely integral to Spurs' build-up, and I think his pressing is a weapon, a chance creation weapon in its own right. But obviously we want to see him have more of a box presence. And one thing that I think is slightly misguided Spurs fans' perception maybe of that first 15 minutes is the goals that we scored, because I think it kind of gave the impression that our pressing was really, really working. And don't get me wrong, there were instances where it was working, but these are two kind of unforced individual errors from Marc Cucurella. And obviously it happens because Brennan Johnson is on him, but change of footwear and he didn't do it again. I'm not saying we didn't press well, because we did force turnovers, but I think the two first goals, and I'm not going to talk through the Kulusevski goal, because same thing happens, and it's a brilliant ballerina feat from Kulusevski, fantastic goal, right? But I wanted to talk about the Solanke one, because I think it's absolutely excellent centre forward play. I think his movement here to peel off of Levi Colwill and get in front of him, because he knows that Sanchez is going to have to kind of come and commit, because that ball is going in that really that corridor of uncertainty where Johnson is so good at delivering the ball at times. Sanchez kind of has to commit. He can't really stay on his line there. He feels like he can come out and claim it. Solanke has obviously recognised that. He gets in front of Colwill, and he knows that he's got a lot more of the goal to aim at, and it's a great finish. And it actually ends up kind of going in the top corner anyway. And I think if Sanchez had have even stayed on his line, it probably still would have gone in. It's excellent from Solanke. Again, for this Son chance here that was at 2-1, just before the Solanke opportunity to make it 3-1 as well. this is brilliant centre-forward play again from Solanke, and something that we've seen really nicely and build up from Spurs a lot this season is the winger kind of coming off the line into these central positions. Son, you can see here, I thought Sonny did lack a lot of sharpness yesterday, especially in the second half. I thought he looked on it in the first sort of 10-15 minutes or so, and he had some bright moments, of course, and he does really well here. But the second half, and that second half chance that might have been offside anyway, just kind of sums maybe where he's up right now. And yeah, I think that natural decline is sort of coming. But if you manage Sonny, you're going to get really good moments out of him. And I think resting him against Bournemouth on Thursday, albeit only for 50 minutes or so, paid dividends in this first half, because I did think he was sharp, despite the fact that I didn't think he was helping Destiny Doggy out necessarily enough. I don't think he was actually doing what I'm talking about here, enough to offer that pass from a Doggy down the line. But he does so well here. But watch Solanke. I think Chelsea fans, from kind of what I could gauge, were really worried about Solanke during this first half. I think I saw some Chelsea fans kind of calling for Tosin Adrabayo to come on, because I think Solanke was getting the better of Colwill, and Badiashile obviously got the better of Colwill for the goal with his off-the-ball movement. But here he backs into him and gets away from him and creates that separation completely. And then these are exactly the sort of situations that you do want Son Heung-Min in, because he showed that he has still got it. This is obviously just wide. This is kind of Son cash money territory that we've spoken about before, and he bends it just wide. Unlucky, of course. But I want to go back to the Sancho goal and kind of how that came about, because there were warning signs. This was in the 6th minute, just after Spurs had taken the lead with Dom Solanke. If I hide myself here, I might need to just move this across a little bit. You can see Fernandes already kind of coming into the picture as the spare man. Caicedo inverting in from right back into the central position. Spurs do quite well to shut off the passing lane to Badiashile. So Caicedo comes back to Colwill here. Kulusevski is obviously really tight on Lavia, which we saw a lot. And what does that do? When you've got the technical security of someone like a Levi Colwill on the ball, it completely create... what he can do is then break that line of Johnson and Kulusevski here and find Enzo Fernandez in this pocket of space. And again, we talked about the fact that naturally Basuma, because of the threat of Cole Palmer's threat has almost become so much that teams are just kind of almost trying to man-mark him as much as possible, which then creates the space for other Chelsea attackers, which when you've got Sancho, you've got Neto, you've got Jackson, you've got a spare man in midfield, whether that's Enzo or whoever it is, or Enzo Fernandez, that's going to cause a lot of teams problems. And I think naturally Basuma was always going out to follow Palmer, creating this space, and it was a warning sign. This was very similar to the goal. They're able to get it out to Sancho, who's able to come in off that touchline. Fernandez again makes that sort of run like he did and receives the ball here out to Jackson, and the cross comes in, it's headed away by Destiny Doggy. But like I said, Spurs had a warning sign. They did have a warning inside those first 6 minutes of what Chelsea were able to do. And I think that inability to stop that and maybe sit back and drop that deeper and not commit as many men forward in the press is 100% on Ange Postecoglou. And that is something that will get him, or will make him have these kind of tags about him being naive and that he's unable to adapt, despite the fact that I'm still behind him. You can understand why people feel like that. And I think in games like this, of course, you want to be super aggressive and you want to go man-to-man because you know you can turn the ball over and you want to show that you're up for it and show that fight. I get that 100%. But Spurs did it so well. Or again, it was unforced errors from Cucurella, but Spurs were on Chelsea. They were on top of them, despite this kind of early warning sign. Just take that key to kind of just drop back, conserve that energy, especially with a tired squad, and not allow as many gaps and defend more in maybe a mid or lower block and just be a bit more solid. One thing that isn't on Ange Postecoglou is this kind of decision-making from Yves Bissouma and Pat Matasar as well. Like, two incredibly soft penalties to give away. And when I say soft, I don't mean that they weren't penalties. Bissouma here, he did exactly the same thing against Qarabag. And I think the frustrating thing with Bissouma is that I think we missed Bentancur in this game just to have that little bit more control. I think Bissouma's kind of decision-making in these kind of situations, it's so frustrating with him because it's like, Bissouma consistently shows us how good he can be and what he can do for us, but he also shows us the flaw as well. Like, it's kind of symptomatic a little bit of the Spurs team. Like, the ceiling is so high, but the floor is so low. And I think Bissouma kind of encapsulates that and represents that, or personifies that maybe more than any other player. Pat Matasar, not so much, but again, like here, Palmer's going nowhere. He's going absolutely nowhere. And look, it's clever from Palmer. I'm not saying he's not bought it, but these are things that Ange Postecoglou can't do anything about. And some of the decision-making out there, some of the sloppy passing Just like in the week against Bournemouth on Thursday, Ange Postecoglou cannot account for the duels being lost and the individual errors, because individual errors have cost Tottenham throughout this season, as well as the structural problems. You know, which one has cost us more? It's kind of up for debate, really. But that was just incredibly frustrating, because we just gifted that. I mean, Chelsea were the better side, and like I said, the control that they had. Again, here you can see the momentum bowl. Again, Spurs don't often get dominating possession at home, but Chelsea had 61% of it. Again, Spurs still beat them on XG, and if you take away the penalties, I know Spurs convincingly won the game on XG, but that doesn't really tell the story. But again, there is an element of, of course, take your chances, and you win this game, and you don't put yourself in this position. But how sustainable is that? Let's talk about the third goal for Chelsea, because I think it kind of also highlighted how we were unable to deal with Maresca's tactical tweak at half time. Obviously, in the second half, he brought on Gusto for Lavia, and Caicedo went into midfield, and Fernandes and him kind of partnered up as that double pivot, which I don't think Spurs were able to deal with. The Chelsea's control just went up massively. Fernandes off the ball in that first half was such a problem, but on the ball in the second half, it just gave them so much more control. And Caicedo in there as well. Caicedo's an absolute joke of a player, by the way. Absolute joke of a player. And I think, as much as I hate Chelsea, as a Spurs fan, I think your appreciation of the technical level of this Chelsea group and what they're trying to do goes up massively when they play your team and you watch them live, as I did at the game yesterday. But one thing Spurs couldn't really cope with, and Cucurella, who obviously had a nightmare first half with the slippiness of the boots, even though the mistakes, was getting forward so much in these kind of areas and popping up as kind of a number 10. It really kind of hurt Spurs, and we weren't able to track him as much. It allowed Fernandes to kind of drop that little bit deeper and get the ball and kind of spray passes out to the wingers as well, and just dictate the game and just be that kind of tempo setter for Chelsea. And again, I think that was kind of evident, obviously, in the third goal. Again, you see Cucurella's position here. You can see Fernandes has got that free space on the edge of the box. And again, obviously, Cucurella does well here because he's taken Werner with him, which has opened up that space even more for Fernandes. And Spurs get a bit unlucky with the deflection. Again, it's magical feat from Palmer. And Palmer, like I said earlier, in terms of what I was saying about Basuma in that first half, is Palmer's always going to attract so many bodies to him, right? Because he's just got twinkle toes. He's got ballerina feet. He's so good in tight spaces. You've got three men there trying to get the ball off him. He jinks in and out. Cross gets deflected. Werner's worried about Cucurella. Kulusevski, again, could he do more to spot Enzo Fernandes there and stop it? Yes, I think so. And it falls to Fernandes in a lot of space to hammer it home. So, yeah, very frustrating. And I think the lack of tactical adaptation from Ange in that game, I think Maresca outclassed him and outsmarted him, and Chelsea were excellent and deserved it. I think one thing I would have really liked to have seen in that second half is when Brennan Johnson went off ill, I would have liked to have seen Maddison come on, because again, as you can see here, we've kind of relinquished all control to Chelsea, and Chelsea did that through their own tactical change, but Spurs could just not get on the ball. We just could not get on the ball at all. I think he should have put Kulusevski out wide, in my opinion, taken Johnson off, instead of bringing Werner on. I think Kulusevski should have gone out here, because again, it wasn't like, of course there was always going to be space that was left by Cucurella going forward, but it wasn't as if you needed the pace necessarily to exploit that, because especially with Timo Werner, what Timo Werner has in pace, he counterbalances that with a real lack of kind of footballing IQ. Kulusevski gives you the complete opposite. So if Kulusevski is in that space, although you're not backing him to win a foot race maybe with Cucurella, he can beat him 100% or exploit that space in another way that Timo Werner can't. So I would really like to see Kulusevski come on, Maddison come on into midfield, Sarr and Basuma drop as more of a pivot, allow Maddison to kind of have that freedom to come back and drop and pick off the ball, but also be able to play that ball out quicker to the wingers when we are trying to counter-attack, but also just a man to slow the game down for 5 minutes and just get on the ball a little bit more and have those touches like we've seen him do so much for Spurs. I found the fact that Ange didn't do that change incredibly frustrating. And yeah, look, we're in a tough spot at the moment. Rangers away on Thursday, Southampton away on Sunday. Have to win those games. Absolutely have to win those games. And then it's Man United in the Cup. 3 must-win games in a row now, and the form's not good. 19 losses, I think, in the last 40 games? Or is it 19 wins? I can't remember which way around it is. Either way, not good. And those issues run far deeper than Ange, but I think yesterday, for me, I think he showed a lack of adaptation, and I think it cost us. I think Maresca outsmarted him. But still fully behind him. Hopefully we can kick on through this period. Hopefully we can get back to winning ways against Rangers and Southampton and Man United. 3 teams that we should be winning. I think we should be beating Man United 100%. And then we're going to Liverpool, which is obviously going to be tough. And I think we need to learn a lot from this game, especially from this, the Sancho goal going into that Liverpool game. Because again, you think of the press resistance of their midfielders, their energy off the ball. You think Curtis Jones, Szoboszlai, etc. It's going to be tough. So hopefully we can put some points on the board over the next couple of games, or next 3 games. Well, not points in the cup game, you know what I mean. Anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you're new, and please like the video and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Up the Spurs. Nice one.